I suppose I don't know what time people are watching this, but from right now as I'm recording it, good morning and welcome to my channel. Today we are continuing work on my 1981 Silverwing. In last video, if you didn't see, I cleared out all this stuff, took off those plastics, rear fender, tail light, turn signals, seat, all that stuff gone, battery, everything. And we really opened up the bike, and now we're able to play with what we want it to look like. I'm thinking I'm gonna go ahead and cut this little section off so that I can start messing around with the seat. In terms of electronics, I think my idea is to go a small fabricated box underneath the seat that could just house everything that I need. In terms of the battery, I think as much as I would like to go lithium ion because of how small their footprint is, how light they are, everything, they're just really, really expensive. So if I can find somewhere to house my big battery, I'll do that. People online said that the exhaust comes down here and then connects across, which it does, to the inside. And they say if you just run two single exhausts instead of that combined exhaust, then there's enough room to house a battery where that little cross piece is in the exhaust underneath. So I don't know how viable that will be or how confident I am in my skills to weld something that will hold a battery there. But I guess we will sort of poke around and decide what's best. But in terms of next steps, I think I'm just going to start cutting some stuff and mocking stuff up with cardboard. And I'll have to make a trip to like Lowe's or Home Depot or something to get sheet metal at some point so that I can start fabricating up some pieces. Getting some welding practice, as I haven't had much experience. Unfortunately, this is a fine way to do it. All those materials aren't going to be crazy expensive, so I have a chance to test it out and try it and learn a new skill. So I'm super excited for today's video. Before I can truly comfortably lay anything out, I need to cut this piece here. So I'm going to go ahead and use an angle grinder to get at that. So just in terms of seat mounting, I decided to go ahead and drill 2 holes right here on this flange that comes out of the tank. And that's because my seat has these 2 posts, which now can sit down, if you line them up right, can sit down inside of here. And we do have a little gap in the tank, as you can see, and I'll figure out if there's a way for me to maybe fill this with some, I don't know, but this is kind of how it's going to look, if that gives you a sense. And we'll of course have this hoop back here. And this will be cut off beyond that point. So that's kind of the look. It's going to be really short. You know, the wheel's going to hang out a little bit, but you know, that's the style of bike. These bikes are pretty long and they look pretty good like this, so I'm excited about it. So I'm down here under the bike now, and I'm thinking that removing the exhaust, like people online said, will be my best bet for hiding the battery box up in there. So I'm gonna go ahead and start taking the exhaust off and seeing how much space I can free up there. I think 2 single exhausts will be fine. So I ended up taking the exhaust off of the bike, off of camera. It was just a few bolts there, and I actually had to pull this part these two sections which run into that off right here so that I could pull the whole exhaust forward. This side slipped right out. This side was stuck in there, so I had to hit it with a hammer as I was holding onto that piece. But it came out relatively easily, I would say. And what we're left with down here is a pretty significant, that exhaust was probably somewhere in this realm. So we have quite a bit of space here now that we can fabricate a battery box, something that should be able to fit our big old battery. So things are looking good. As I began thinking about the battery and where I want to put it, how I want to mount it, all that stuff, I figured I should also take into account my starter solenoid, all these other heat sinks and wiring that needs to be kept on the bike. A lot of people, of course, delete their turn signals on these cafe style bikes, but I do want to have turn signals. I want to be fully road legal. My state doesn't have inspections, but it's still good to have. I don't want to ticket for something stupid like that. My two thoughts originally were, one, a little box that would sit under the seat and then the electronics would just sit down inside. But I want to get this stuff some air if it needs it. Of course, it didn't have that much air originally because it was covered up by these plastic little shrouds or fairings or whatever. But the other was to just flat plate on the frame underneath where the seat will sit, and then just mount this stuff up to the bottom of it. So I think that's a pretty good idea. Honestly, if the bike was any easier to start cold, I would just bump it and throw the battery out. But unfortunately, it takes a while to crank over when it's cold. So I guess now it's just time to start mocking up some designs and deciding on materials as we begin the process of rerouting the wiring and getting things hidden and tucked and looking good. I want to do this job to the best of my abilities. I want it to look good and I want it to look clean. So that's my main focus with doing all this electrical work in terms of tidying things up. Maybe you can tell, maybe you can't, but I decided to cut the frame off a little bit further. I still have these two bars coming together with my welds, so structure's fine. And these braces are still here. I'm not sure if I'm going to remove these and put something else in or what, but I went ahead and took my hoop and cut off the bottom half here. It's really rough, but just for what I need, it's fine because it'll all clean up really well. So the reason I did this piping, this tubing, whatever, is a larger diameter than this stuff. So I can't adapt it out the end, and I can't run it in, and I don't really want to cut this off and have to weld it. So it's much easier for me to just slap this thing on top, and it'll sit just like that, if that makes sense. And then with the seat, it will end up looking something like that. With a small gap, I'm going to deal with that. And I also was able to pick up some sheet metal that I'm going to use to fabricate my battery box, all that stuff. I just went to a local steelworks type place, welding shop, local to me, and they got me that. That piece cost me 30 bucks. I have no reference whether that's high or low, but the convenience of getting it, day of, in a shape that's going to be beneficial to my use was worth that price. So that's where we're at now. So electronics to sort, this stuff is going to be how I'm going to make the box for the battery and all that stuff. And then in terms of what we're doing here, we'll start to get ready to close the end of this up somehow. And then after that, we will get that hoop welded on like that and kind of smoothed out and everything looking pretty cohesive. So very excited with how this is looking so far. So before anything else with fabrication, I wanted to go ahead and get this hoop in place. So I went ahead and ground down on the frame itself
so that I have a clean contact patch, and I'm going to take a little grinder to this edge in this area so that we can get a nice clean weld. I'm probably just going to clamp it in place, tack weld, and then just tack and kind of follow along. And hopefully that's enough for what I need, but I guess I'll just cut to me welding. So this is of course a learning process. I have not welded anything before. It's thin metal. I'm using flux core. Of course my experience, like I said, is very little. But this is what I came up with. I had to overlay a little piece because this stuff was just too thin. I kept burning through. But like I could pick the bike up from this point. So I'm really happy with it. And on the end here where I cut off the tube, this sheet metal, I just cut off a little strip, threw it up in there, ground it. I've got a little bit of material to fill in there, and it looks really, really bad, but it'll get ground down and painted, so you guys won't even know. With a fresh layer of paint on it now, I'll show you guys the good side, and good is a really, really kind of a generous term. But on this other side, which the paint's even more fresh over here, I kept burning through. I had to lay stuff on top of it. It's not good. And a lot of that probably is just welding experience. And also this welder, super cheap flux core, only has a min and max temp. So if I had control over my temperature, maybe I'd be better off. But you know, we're done to the extent at which I feel comfortable. And you know, these end caps turned out all right. A little more paint needed there, and the weld is horrendous. But this other side looks actually not bad. It could be better, but you know, that's not something that people are going to be poking and looking at too much. So yeah, feeling good. I'm probably going to call it here. All this stuff basically took me an entire day to do. I still have yet to mock up and fabricate the battery tray and the electronics tray. But once I do that, honestly, the bike should go back together really, really quickly, and it should just be plug and play, start up and ride. I will have to figure out air filters and maybe get some new jets for the carburetors. But other than that, it should be pretty much ready to go. So thanks for watching, guys.